Good afternoon. Great to see you all here today afternoon for this very, very special session. We have the honor of hosting Mr. Raymond Vickery here.
The aspect of India-US strategic and economic relationships has been a matter of deep interest for all of us in India. And we have seen the relationships vary over the period. We all remember the very warm years of Kennedy administration and the Clinton administrations, and we also remember the cold years of Nixon. And the whole relationship has moved in this range. Nothing can actually strengthen the relationships more than a very strong economic interaction. And I think the main hypothesis that good international relationships are based on strong economic ties is core to understanding how nations interact with each other. And that is the basic thought that Mr. Vickery has been pursuing for quite some time.
Well, let's talk about the eagle and the elephant, strategic aspects of U.S.-India economic engagement to get started. And I do mean just to get started because I think that the most important thing is, Mr. Pandit, that we can have some sort of interchange here. And because I'm going to learn as much out of this as you're going to learn, and that can only happen if we follow Dr. Kelkar's rule and have that give and take, which makes it feasible. I wrote this book because it occurred to me that the United States and India had gone in the early 2000s from a state of being, in the words of Dennis Cooks, a co-author and colleague of mine at the Woodrow Wilson Center, from being estranged democracies to being essential allies and partners in strategic matters across the board. And so how did that go from estrangement to partnership? But from my own experience, that wasn't the way it happened at all. That the driver in the moving from estrangement to partnership was in fact economic engagement. And some have said, I might say the reviews in the book, thank goodness, have been very good. But some have said, well, you can't really say that because what you're saying is that economics is the determinant, sort of a Marxist theory of what happens politically. That's not the thesis at all. The thesis is, and if you look at the book, there's an illustration of it, what I call feedback loops. And that means that we do not have a separate political military system and a separate economic system, but they're all part of one system. But the real question is, if you want to make progress, if you want to do things positively, where is the best inflection point to be able to make the loop into a virtuous circle rather than being a non-virtuous circle? And so I would add to the thesis that economic engagement is the driver of the ability of United States and India to cooperate strategically. I would say the opposite is also true, that if you have economic engagement which goes wrong, which is dislocation, and you can't agree, and you start fighting instead of cooperating on the economic front, that is going to have an adverse effect in what happens politically and ultimately politically, militarily. Some have said, well, we recognize that economic engagement is important, but it's a ballast or it's a foundation. And in my view, that does not capture the dynamic quality of economic engagement. And so I prefer to think of it And I hope that more and more people who are in the foreign policy establishment will think of it as a driver, as an engine which pushes matters forward. I do think that it's important to look at the term economic engagement. What do we mean by that? And people often say, well, or immediately what comes to it, engagement is trade. But of course, it's a lot broader than trade. It is investment as well as trade. And then beyond that, it is the lending, the aid, the monetary and fiscal regulation of all of these, which I mean and encompass by use of the term economic engagement. And what I advocate is that the economic aspect of pushing forward strategic cooperation be incorporated and inculcated in those who are carrying out foreign policy. And the fact is, whether it be on the State Department side or Indian equivalent here, there is a paucity of ability to utilize economic engagement as an instrument of strategic cooperation because we put economics, business, commercial relationship, those people who have expertise in those fields in a secondary position too often. We do not draw on the wellsprings even within our own governments because of bureaucratic infighting, and that is something that when you talk about strategic matters being affected by economic engagement that we need to overcome. And so with those three groups, the business, commercial, economic engagement put together with the policy and with the strong interest of people who knew viscerally both India and the United States, we were able to put together a coalition for partnership with India. Well, I say far to the contrary. If we had not been able to do the civil nuclear agreement, India would have remained isolated from the nuclear suppliers group and an outlier. And what we have done, in effect, is bring together the community of nations, those who are interested in non-proliferation, but at the same time exploitation of the promise of civil nuclear, and it has laid the foundation for cooperation in defense procurement and in areas which you might not necessarily think of as influenced by civil nuclear matters. One of my theses is that the economic engagement helped to bring us through in terms of a policy relationship in a more positive manner than might otherwise have been the case. You know, there is a theory that diplomacy is not so much about making good things happen, but making really horrible things deferred, at least. Now let's look, if we can, at the present time. I've just come from a program in Delhi called Petrotech, sponsored by the Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas. And the paper that I presented was U.S. liquefied natural gas and India's energy needs. And I think many in this room know that in the United States there has been a revolution in regard to energy resource availability. There has been a revolution. The United States is now the largest producer of natural gas in the world, and it is at the level in oil production of Saudi Arabia. Now that is a very, very different situation. So that is an indication, and this all comes about through what we call shale plays in the United States. And a play is simply a term for shale, which was bearing of hydrocarbons, which could be released by modern technology. It's been one of the great strengths of the United States that we have had a system which encourages innovation. And I think one of the great areas in which there can be a transfer between the United States and India is in that area of technological innovation. Dr. Kelkar knows, as we all know, that one of the greatest, if not the greatest, reservoirs of talent in terms of basic research and engineering is here in India. And if you can release that, then you can have these kinds of inflections which have proven so important in regard to shale gas. Well, we now have in the United States the availability of gas, both in terms of this unlocking of the gas which was already there, combined with an infrastructure which gets it to the right place at the right time for liquefaction. And we are working on the other aspect of availability, which of course is government regulation and being able to put that in place. In terms of affordability, the United States is the only place in the world in which the price of gas is set competitively on a market basis. Now, we've been talking about economic engagement and its relationship to security. And security is very much a part of this picture that is influenced by what's happening in the United States. The security aspects of LNG are several. One of them is physical security itself. I note with some interest in the Indian press stories that Mozambique is going to be a savior for India in terms of LNG needs. Well, first of all, the amounts involved are hypothetical, and there's a question about that. But you have to look, and I have nothing against Mozambique, but you have to look, India has to look at its own security situation. The fact is, Mozambique has on its flag an AK-47. Thirdly, in regard to security, it's what Winston Churchill used to say about oil. And the answer of Winston Churchill was the only security will be in diversity of supply. And so India has to consider that aspect of security. Let me talk about another benefit if you have economic engagement in regard to LNG. The fact is that India has not explored its own domestic resources to the extent that it should. Now I ask you, how are you more likely to have the tech transfer that India needs? What would be better than engaging on a continuous basis with the United States in regard to gas and LNG as a promotion of that kind of activity? We've talked about the possibility of environmental remediation. There's another chart in this particular talk which compares gas to all the other sources of pollutants. If you look at carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxide, sulfur dioxide, particulates, and mercury. So here again, economic engagement can drive cooperation in regard to what we traditionally consider as security matters, namely political military cooperation, and at the same time drive India's own energy security. Let's go back a little bit to the theory of economic engagement. And this is nothing new. John Stuart Mill, whom you know was the liberal philosopher, spoke of international trade as the principal guarantee of the peace of the world. So there is going to be an impact, and there is an impact in terms of economic engagement. The question for us is whether or not we're going to use it positively and make it a part of a virtuous circle relationship with political and traditional security matters, or whether it will go the other way. But I believe that economic engagement should be an integral part of planning on every strategic issue and international relationship of importance to India from the get-go. And to leave it out is absolutely not acceptable. In order to achieve optimum effectiveness from economic engagement, the government must have adequate economic and commercial expertise. And since this expertise is so limited, it is absolutely necessary that bureaucratic barriers, and my final point in terms of prescriptive statements in the book, is that there must be a strong public-private partnership. I believe that it is in the best interest of the United States, of India, and all of us to use economic engagement as a positive force to secure both peace and prosperity for ourselves and our posterity. And that's what I have put the last 20 years of my life working on. And as long as I have vigor, I intend to continue that. And once again, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be here with you, and I hope we've left enough time for some engagement, Dr. Mr. Pandit, Mr. Jain. Thank you very much.